Hello, welcome to Dave What's in the Workshop. Today we're going to be having another look at the Cota 247. As you probably saw in the last video, I failed to get it running within 3 days and completing the trial. Was a bit of a tall order. The bike was obviously in quite a bit worse condition than I'd hoped. Needed quite a lot of work, so I got thinking, well, what else can I do? So I thought, how about I try and get it completely rebuilt within 2 weeks for under £100. Now, it's ambitious, but let's have a look and see how it's gone. I think it's time this had a wash. It is filthy. Right, let's see how it comes up. Oh yeah, that's much better. So, obviously I've washed it because it's changed colour. All the black just came off with the hot pressure washer, but the frame underneath is really good. There's surface rust, but nothing's really bitten in. No dents, no bends, cracks. I'm pretty happy with that. This has become a bit more white. Still terrible in the long run, but rear swing arm's fine, not seized. Bushes are okay. Forks, I mean, that chrome's really good. Seals, I don't think there's any. Well, I took the drain plug out one of the forks and I just got water. So these I think will clean up. I just did one rub my finger on the wheel, and that's, I think, going to come up lovely. These I think are aluminium, so they'll clean up. Rear shocks were completely seized, so straight in the bin with them. So I think the next thing to do, I'll rub the frame down while it's still in one piece. It's a bit easier. And then I'll take off the wheels, take off the rear swing arm, forks off, and we'll get some paint on it. So, I've cleaned all the engine casings and all bits and bobs in the parts washer by hand, but that always leaves an oily residue. Obviously you can either get it off with brake cleaner and airline, or what I like to do is I've got a hot washer, diesel making it hot. I give everything a really good pressure wash, gets it hot and clean, then airline it off. Right, so these casings have now gone from being absolutely grotty and horrible to nice and build clean, ready to go. I'm going to wrap them up in a bit of plastic now so they keep all nice and clean until we're ready to put them together. So while I wait for bits for the rest of the engine to arrive, this gear cluster, I wasn't going to take it apart. I usually tend to cable tie it all as a one when I remove it, and then brake cleaner it off as best I can, but just then keep that clean so no grit and dirt gets on it, just clean oil that was in there before and brake cleaner it off. However, I realised the shim that is supposed to adjust the end float on this shaft, like this one here, instead of being this side of the shaft, it's here, between the gear and the shaft. So I suspect this engine's been apart before, and as always happens, everything falls apart, goes everywhere if you're not careful, and they've put that shim back in the wrong place. So, good opportunity. I'll take this all apart and we'll go through how this goes together, in case you've got a 247 in bits yourself, and when you split the engine casing, sometimes bits go everywhere and you think, oh no, how on earth do these gears go together? Because there's not much in the way of manuals about, not specifically telling you the order of the gears and things anyway. So we'll have a little look at that and stick it back together. So first of all, got to cut the cable tie. Right. You should be able to slide the input shaft out. We can leave that complete for this because we don't need to touch that, but just so you know, this has these three rollers here. There's 3 different lengths of roller in this gear cluster set. The shortest ones go here on the input shaft. That's my shim falling on the floor. I'll get that. So they sit in there, and then to retain them, you slide that gear in place. They can't go anywhere. So I'll leave that together, but you can see those gears are part of the shaft, and these ones here slides into that gear, slides into the other one there. So that's that one. This, again, we'll slide it off the selectors. And we'll keep this in order. That one. That one. I've got the 3 pins here. That one. And then another 3 there. So now I can get this off, get him out, and slide it back together again. So this gear, 3 medium length pins. You can see they're just a little bit shorter than those ones. Slide those in. Them. This one goes on. That one, and this one. So that when the selector is on there, that slides between engaging with this gear and engaging with this gear. Then it was this one. That one goes this way round. This bit's upward, because that will then engage with this gear. You see again there, but where that goes in there, this goes on. Oh. Make sure you've got a nice clean floor when you do this as well, because inevitably things go astray. Right, there's that one in there, and then this one goes down, goes back on there, so that when the selector's on here, it can go between this gear and this gear, like that. Okay. Slide that back on. So. Oh, come back. What have we got? Get back on there. Go on. Right. That one back in there. You can slide between those. And then this one. Engages here. That one in there. Like that. There we go. That's your cluster built back up again. Actually, now with this shim free, but on the end of there, it sits up against the bearing. Just shim the float on this shaft rather than randomly sitting against a gear. I hope that helps if anyone's got one of these they need to put together. The only other shims you'll find might fall out are these ones here on this shaft. For this shaft, the shims are on this side, and these two, they go on that end. Right, done. So it's now Friday evening, and I think I've got pretty much every part I need to get the bike back together. So all these parts have been cleaned, they're ready to go back together. Piston's fine. However, the gudgeon pin was too far gone, just where it sat rusty. So I managed to put the sizes in, and I managed to order a new gudgeon pin of the correct size. So that's fine, that'll sort that out. You saw I managed during the week to take this apart and put it back together. Now the crank. Obviously the crank for this was no good at all. It had to be fully rebuilt. So I have borrowed the crank from my uncle's Cota 247 engine. It's okay, this crank. It'll go again. But his bike is a much nicer bike than mine. So I thought, if either of them deserves a nice rebuilt crank, it's his, not mine. And it saves time. I'm not going to likely to refit the engine to his this year now, so that's fine. I've got time to rebuild that and do it properly for his one. So I'm not going to go into as much detail in this engine build as I did in the Cota 331, because it's basically the same engine. So I've already covered most of it. But what I didn't cover in the last one was the crank shimming. So these engines, there's no stop for the main bearings. They can sit wherever they want in there. They shrink fit in there. So they're controlled by these shims on the seal carriers. This crank is the exact same size as the one that's been removed. I've measured that. So I don't anticipate having to change the shims, but we'll double check. So what we had to do, I've heated up one of the new main bearings, popped it on one side of the crank, and next we're going to heat the case side where that bearing sits, bolt this up in place with the shims it's got, sit that in there, and then we can put the other case half together with that one without a bearing on that side, and just measure to make sure the crank is central. And then if we need to add shims we can. If we need to take away shims, that's a bit more of a pain, because obviously by this point the bearing is then that's cooled down. Yeah, it's a bit of a pain really, but there we are. All these seals, I just took them to my local bearing supplier. They provided me with the new seals. So I've got everything apart from the crank seals, because I made a bit of a error. I found my bag of 247 seals and gaskets, and I thought, okay, there's one seal left in there. That adds up because I pinched one for the 330 build from this kit. So I went down to the bearing suppliers and I got another 3. So I had some for the other engine as well. Except I just came to fit them and realised that what I had there were the fork seals for the 330. And I've also just been back down today and got some more fork seals. So pretty well stocked for fork seals, but no bearing seals. No major problem. I can still build the rest of the engine up. I can pop them in afterwards. I've got plenty to do on the frame anyway, so I think that's enough to keep me going this weekend with the time I'll get on it. But I might try and pop down the bearing supplies tomorrow morning and get the right ones. But we'll see. I'll get this side of the case really hot. Pop the crank in the freezer for a minute. Drop that in. This, no seal in there at the minute. I mean, I haven't got it obviously, but even if I did have the seal, I wouldn't put it in for now. We're heating that up. Just dry gasket, no seal or anything. It's coming back off again. I leave it just slightly loose, so that when the crank pops in, and it's all the way, when you then tighten it up again, you'll see the crank just move in a bit. Make sure you do this while it's still hot, so there's no resistance, but then you know it's all the way back against this, all the way in. And then I put the gasket in between the case halves. Again, dry, no sealer. Just pull the case together on the two ends. And then you've just got two feeler gauges. Measure the gap each side between the crank halves and the case. Obviously it's not completely accurate because there's no bearing on this side, so there's still a bit of movement, but you don't want to put the bearing in this side because you want to split the case again without having to heat it up. And yeah, if anybody knows a better way of doing that, let me know. But I'm satisfied from that the state of shimming as it was before is okay. The only thing I'm going to have to check is when I put the bearing on that side and do this side up, that they are touching on that side when it all goes back together. But satisfied for that side, so I think we're good. Take it back together, back apart again now, and put some more bits in it. Didn't take a video last night because it was late and I was tired, but got the bottom end together, obviously all the gearbox in, this is shimmed. I'm going to take these back off now to put the seals in. Otherwise that's all the bottom end done. I'll now put the top end together. So it's now Saturday afternoon. I left the engine after I got that together last night, the bottom end together. That's all the sort of bits that needs to stay really clean together, and the top end can wait a bit, because I thought, right, I'll get back to the frame and the rest of the bike, get some paint on that, get it drying, and then when it's done that, I can then go and finish the engine. So, as you can see, I stripped it down a bit more, popped the back wheel out, and the front. The headstock bearing needed adjusting anyway, not rusty on the balls thankfully, but you can, I think, get a conversion kit for these to taper roll, which I will at some point, but that's all off. So got to rebuild the forks there, clean everything up, sort out the front brakes, that's all then ready to go back on. Rest of the frame, I rubbed it down the other day. I now need to finish that off a bit more. Got to take the rear swing arm off, a bit more rubbing down. Now get some paint on that and finish off the engine, put it back together. Okay, we're almost ready for paint. The swing arm put up a real fight. The bar was seized in the bushes, but fortunately I managed to get that out of there, because otherwise that's a nightmare, because you've got to chop it. And, so yeah, that was close, but we got it out. This bike is very much, I think, if it's sat in that shed any longer, it'd be a real problem. There'd be a lot of really seized things, and yeah, I think we've caught it just in time. So all sanded down, I've just got to clean it up and then get some paint on. It's now early afternoon on the Sunday. Just come out to the garage to have a look at the frame, and it is doing really well. Yeah, for a brush paint job, that's come out well. I mean, I was ever so careful to try not to get any runs or sags, but it's come out very shiny. I think when that's all built up, that's going to look good. Unfortunately, the paint's still quite tacky, so I don't think I'm going to be able to build the bike back up today. But that's okay, I could do with a bit of a day off it anyway. So we'll pause for today and come back to it tomorrow evening, I think. Quick bit on rebuilding the forks on these, ever so easy. There's one bolt sits on the bottom of the fork, so if it's on the bike you can just undo that bolt, pull the fork off and leave the stanchion on. Obviously I've got mine off, so the stanchion just drops out. Then there's one washer sits on the bottom, and then there's a rubber piece there that sits inside, and there's another bit I'll show you when I put it back together. And then there's a ring sits in there, retaining ring, get that out with your circlip pliers, and then it just takes a stack of 2 oil seals like that. So nice easy job to do these. Okay, all cleaned up, ready to go back together. What we need now, 2 new seals, bit of grease to help them in. Seal number 1. And an appropriate socket to knock that in with. A bit bigger. Perfect. Seal in. Second seal. I can almost push them in by hand, but not quite. Okay, it's 2 seals fully in. At this point, don't forget your circlip. Circlip there. Come back in. Okay. Then, one nice clean stanchion. Bit of grease on that as well. Before that goes in, this washer needs to go down at the bottom. Drop him in there. And then the tapered black plastic. It's slightly tapered end goes in here like that, and that's a little spring loaded thing there. That tends to stay in, so it shouldn't be a problem. Nice and greasy. In the new seals. You go it all the way down. Up. Then you want this bit. Again, grease on this rubber and the aluminium at the end here. Nice and grease on that one. It goes in that way around because this is your thread that holds it at the bottom. There. You might need a little assistance to get down. And there we go. Then turn it up the other way around and do that up again on the bottom. Done. Okay, so we're now on Tuesday. As you can see, I was reasonably busy last night. I got the front forks back on after I rebuilt them. Brakes and things in. Now I've just assembled the mudguard, which is a new mudguard that came with it. I just cleaned up the handlebars and put them back on. Engine now bolted in as well. So obviously I need some controls and cables and things next. And a rear end, but we're getting there. So some reasonable progress made this evening. I've got a new tyre fitted to the back wheel. Cleaned up the back wheel, that takes forever. I still need to clean up the back wheel some more, but I figured I can do that once the bike's built up, so that's no problem. Got the rear swing arm on. Got the new shocks on. They're actually some second-hand NJBs, but only lightly used. They were 50 quid, which is half my budget, but I think they're worth it. Obviously all the front ends together. Around this side, we've got the chain on. So we're getting there. So hopefully tomorrow we'll see a bit more progress. Hopefully most of the time consuming things are out of the way, like cleaning up the wheel and bits and bobs like that. So we should be able to make a bit quicker progress. Hopefully we'll see it running this side of the weekend with a bit of luck. Well, it's been a busy one this evening. Pretty much got everything back together. We got the exhaust on, polished up the chrome on that one, looks pretty good. Then got the middle box, you can't quite see hiding under there. Back one on there, still got this horrible rear mudguard. I haven't bothered painting or anything with that, it's awful really, but obviously we're on a very tight budget on this at the minute, so that's a luxury and something we can easily replace later. So that is what it is for now. Polished up the tank, that's polished up really nicely. When I put the carburetor on, I could see daylight through the top of the flange. Somebody had really over tightened it. So I took that back off, heated it up, tweaked the edges as much as I could, and then just flatted it back with the file, made sure it was nice and flat. Could have done it in the mill, but there was no need really for that because it has no ring to seal it anyway. So you've just got to make sure that these side lugs are not bent completely back one way or the other. So that's on. Got the controls back on up here. Got the rear brakes on. Levers back on. And on this side we've got controls painted back on up there. Kickstart on. Gear lever on. Yeah, pretty pleased with tonight's progress. I have just checked. I don't seem to have... Well, I think it's time. I think we're ready for its first start in who knows how many years. Fingers crossed. have it, all done. A couple of little issues still to sort out. Carburetor needs a bit of tuning, a few bits and pieces, but nothing too major. But most importantly, it runs. It's a complete bike. I can ride it round. Mission accomplished. Cost wise, I spent about 50 quid on the rear shocks. They're nice NJBs, second hand. I spent about 30 probably on oil seals, those sorts of bits and pieces. I have been quite lucky in that I've been able to borrow a crank for it, and I had gasket set in stock. But even if I had to pay for those items, and you're pretty unlucky to need a whole crank really, but worst case, it would still have been a really cheap rebuild. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with it.